Welcome to Misunderstood, where we talk about identity, the meaning of the word race, and explore the multicultural and multiracial experience through personal stories, candid conversation, and expert insight. I'm your host, Hanna-Lee, and today we have a pre-recorded episode with my former co-host, Amy Maghera. A few months ago, we sat down with Dr. Jennifer Noble, aka Dr. Jenn, who is a licensed psychologist and coach to parents of mixed-race children.
The issue that applies so much to the mixed race experience is this feeling or this belief that there is a right way to be or there's a correct way to interact with the world versus realizing, oh, I don't need to, or I can't follow, first of all the rules that you might have already set out, so I should stop trying. And then second of all, oh, I get to just be me and I can do that however I want.
My link to Japan and Australia is there, but I don't speak Japanese. I never lived in Japan or Australia, and it's like I'm trying to hold on to those things, but they're not that strong in me to begin with. How do I give that to my kid as well? And then how do I incorporate that with a husband who's from another culture?
How can you support your kid when maybe the rest of the world is telling them, oh, well, you can't be this, you don't look that, or you know, at least at home, you can be the contrary sort of voice.
Perfect timing with this episode coming out because Dr. Jenn has actually put together the Free to Be Fest for mixed people and allies, meaning interracial couples and friends or family of mixed race folks. It's going to be next Sunday, June 9th in downtown LA. There's still time to get your tickets, and there's going to be a special discount code for Misunderstood listeners. It's Misunderstood10. And guess what? Misunderstood is going to be there. I will be interviewing people coming into the event, and we're going to compile together a beautiful collage of mixed stories and anecdotes from the guests. If you're not in LA, you can get virtual tickets. They're being sold for you to tune in via Zoom. Alrighty, so before we dive into the episode, it's important to say that Misunderstood is here to offer up stories, ideas, and various theories for you to consider and decide for yourself in light of your own knowledge and experience. I hope to explore, learn, and grow together with you. I do not profess to have any of the answers. My aim is just to start conversations around these topics.
Hi, Dr. Jenn.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for just being here, and we're just so excited to really get into this topic with you.
Yes.
Genuinely. So, okay, before we go any further, let's just do a little introduction to Jenn and just tell you a bit more about her. So Dr. Jennifer Noble, Dr. Jenn, is a licensed psychologist. She has a PhD in clinical psychology. She is also a lover of adolescence and a coach for parents of mixed-race children. She is the creator of the Mixed Life Academy, an online coaching program and community for parents of mixed-race kids, helping them raise confident, resilient children. She has a private practice in Los Angeles where she works with teens, their parents, women of color, and other marginalized groups. She also has taught collegiate level psychology for over 15 years. Her passion for identity, freedom, and the mixed race experience are fueled by her lived experience as an African American and Sri Lankan Tamil woman.
A few fun facts about Dr. Jenn. Number one,
I speak Spanish, and I think it's kind of a fun fact because I'm not Latina, and I'm mixed race, but neither group is a Spanish-speaking group. So
That's amazing. How do you know how to speak Spanish?
I did a study abroad. So when I was an undergrad, I had a major. Well, I think I had Spanish classes that we had to take as a requirement, and during orientation, the teacher was sort of like, well, you know, you could just do this or that and turn it into a major and it'd be good for psychology. And I was like, okay. And so then she was like, well, you should join our program and do study abroad next year. And like the young me, I didn't even think about it or call anybody. I was like, oh, okay. So,
I'll do that.
yeah. So I lived a year in Argentina and I had no...
Argentina.
Yeah. I had no choice but to learn Spanish. So
how
we
cool
took
is that?
we took more Spanish classes there, and then it was on a campus with all South Americans. So
I'll ask you a question. You answer me in
Espanol.
What is your favorite animal? of a good question.
Good question. Mi animal favorito es elefante.
Oh, yo
A
también.
mí me encanta elefantes.
Muy bien.
Es muy bonita. Do you know what?
Let's just
I
throw
actually
all
learned.
the...
Let's just
Yeah, I
do the
know.
whole
What else
thing in
can I
Spanish
say?
now.
Yeah. Alrighty, well...
Número dos.
Oh, yeah. My second fun fact, I have a cup of tea every day.
Aw.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Same.
Yeah, and it's more, I guess whoever, colonized, blah, blah, blah. But it's more of a Sri Lankan thing. My mom used to have a cup of tea or every afternoon. And sometimes, I never really did. So I would just kind of look at her and roll my eyes and be like, Mom, it's like 100 degrees outside. Why are you having hot tea? So she'd be like, leave me alone, like every day. And so somewhere in there, I started making tea for myself. And I was like, oh, I get it. So pretty much
It's a ritual.
Yeah, I just really, every once in a while I might do a coffee instead. Or if I'm out, I'm really picky, I guess, about tea. So I can't just go anywhere and get black tea, and it's always like too weak and whatever.
Yeah.
So I'd rather just get a coffee when I'm out, because I think most, especially in America, maybe we do that a little bit better.
I agree.
Yeah. So if I'm at home, I'm going to make tea. If people come over, I'm going to have tea in the afternoon. They can join me, But
Do you have it with milk?
yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Yeah. Actually half and half. I used to do sweetened sweetened condensed milk.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because is that how they make it in Sri Lanka?
You can, but no, it's not. It's not standard. That would still be special,
Okay.
to have that. But sugar and milk, and so the creamier it is, I like it better. So, but I tried to be like, okay, I can't have that much condensed milk.
We should have recorded this at your house. And
Yeah.
then we could have all had this tea that
I
I'm
know.
craving now.
Yeah, and it would be Sri Lankan tea, Dilma tea. So you would,
Dilma tea.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
famous brand.
All right.
Number 3.
I think the number 3 would be that I still take naps.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, so you should.
Yeah.
In my book.
I'm a believer in naps. I don't know. It's not that I read something and was like, I'm going to start taking naps. It's just my body shuts down around like 2:33 no matter what I do. So even when I was in grad school, I would just be in class and just kind of start like nodding off. And
Yeah.
so I would just put my head down 10, 15 minutes. Like I don't need, to me, a nap is not 2-3 hours. Like,
yeah.
You went to sleep. But for me, a nap is like 15, 30 minutes. And then I can wake up and be like, maybe once I wake up, then I'll make my tea. And then I kind of do like second shift, like afternoon into whatever amount of time I'm going to be working. So
My mom is a nap taker.
Ah.
It's the golden law in our house. And growing up, we're 5 kids. And the rule was that from 2 to 4, Mom takes a nap, and don't you dare wake
good
her
for
up.
her.
And a few times she would wake up like raging because we were too loud. We were playing. You know how kids are.
Yeah.
Kids have like the loudest voices in the
Yeah.
world. But over time, we learned how to like gently open a door and close it. And like bags, anything plastic is like not
Roughly
an option.
sounds.
No cookies.
Yeah.
No opening like a packet of cookies while she was sleeping. She could hear it. And we used to tell her she has like elephant ears, speaking of elephants, because she could hear everything.
So she's a light sleeper
Yeah.
too.
I love taking a nap. Honestly, whenever I visit Mediterranean countries where they have siestas, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm all about this.
Yes.
Right. I learned, when I lived abroad, that was something I would kind of like, still in my American mindset. I'm like, I have some downtime. Let me go to the post office. Let me do this. I'm like, why is everything closed? And so they were like, oh, yeah, FYI. I'm like, oh. So then I learned how to just,
Yeah.
let me go lay on the grass, relax, listen to music, fall asleep, So, yeah, it's a
such
good
a nice
practice.
thing.
Yeah.
So just to go back to your background, you are an African American and Sri Lankan Tamil woman. What was that like growing up for you?
It's such a hard thing to answer that like one succinct little, this is exactly how it was,
Of course.
But I always kind of start with like, it was fine. It was just normal to me. I think what I kind of realized later is that, this is how the world sees me, or this is this is what the world does or doesn't know. So I think for me growing up, what I would say is the world saw me as African American. So that's how I was treated. So that's how I was interacted with. And that's what I came to start to understand. Probably like somewhere in elementary school, I sort of started to put together like, oh, okay, this is how they see me, even though I know who my family is or I know how I'm treated with different people. And so I think on some level, me moving through the world was very much an African-American experience, simply because of the way the world treated me. What made it harder is that if I did assert like, oh yeah, no, it's, I have Sri Lankan family, they'd be like, oh, where's that? Or what? Or they make that face of like, oh. You're like, do you know where that is? I think okay, let me just tell you because clearly, you've never heard of this country and you're trying to, keep the conversation going. There's not a lot of Sri Lankans in California, like spread out.
Yeah.
There are pockets of Sri Lankans here in Southern California. So just so the listeners know, it's like, I'm not saying in the U.S. Maybe if I lived in some parts of New York, there were higher populations. But it's just, there's just not a lot of Sri Lankans in the U.S. If you go to Toronto, if you go to the U.K., other countries like that, if you think about it, it was a British influenced country. So education systems, they went to where those education systems matched. So it was a little bit less common or like less of a default to come to the U.S. right away because the education system would kind of mess you up.
Okay.
So your mother's Sri Lankan.
Yes.
And how did she get to the States?
My father's American. So, he came back home.
Where did they meet?
They met in the UK, actually. Yeah.
So how did she get to the UK or what?
Oh, my mother went to the UK for nursing school.
Okay.
So then my father was there, and then they lived in other European countries, and then at some point it was like, okay, time to move back to my home. She's like, okay. That's the actual script. That's what happened.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
My dad's from Chicago, so they lived in Illinois for a while, and then I was born here. So then they moved here. Yeah, my dad is a jazz musician, so he was pursuing
Amazing.
So he moved here partly to pursue the music, as so many.
What
do.
does he play?
Piano.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Amy plays piano too.
Oh. Somehow I don't believe this.
I can play about 3 songs and trick people into thinking I'm really good.
There you
Yeah.
go. There you
Well,
go.
not really good, but okay. So getting into the theme of the episode about how parents can support their mixed race children, what are some of the things that you see parents, what kind of challenges are they going through?
When they're seeking therapy for their kids? Because I try to separate the two. Like sometimes I just work with parents by themselves. But yeah, if a parent...
and you also work with their kids as well?
No, if I'm doing the coaching, that's just with the parents and kind of just teaching them what they need to know, helping them navigate stuff. But then if it's therapy, it's most likely therapy for the kid, and I will work with the parents, right? So the parents are often the ones seeking therapy, right? Because it's a minor. So they're sort of like, oh, I think my kid, an example would be during the pandemic, I had at least 3, if not more, mixed race kids who were really trying to grapple with all they were seeing with George Floyd and the protests and what was happening on social media and also with their peers. And there was this feeling of feeling split because all of the people I'm talking about had a white parent and an African-American parent. And so those parents were realizing, okay, my kid is either crying a lot more than normal, they're not wanting to go to school, their grades are falling. And, of course, some of that is just pandemic stuff, but they were noting that these kids were saying just so much concern around how do I understand what side, almost what side do I take? How do I make my voice heard? And then if I do make my voice heard, all of my friends are trolling me essentially for trying to stand up for something I believe in. And then the parent feeling like at a loss to have that discussion with the kid and wanting them to have a safe space. So it was a very unique, not quite fitting a disorder situation, but a crisis more than anything of what was just going on at the time. And this kid being too young and seeing way too much and wanting a place to navigate it, but specifically wanting a place where they could say, this is how I'm feeling when I'm tied to these two groups that, at least in the media, seem to be at odds.
I like that word, tied to a group, because as human beings, that's what we do, right? For safety and survival, you got to kind of attach yourself to a group, and people do it, they do it with their faith, with their religion, with their, I went to this college, and it is tricky when you're tied to two groups that are suddenly in conflict.
Right. And a lot of the parents, just to kind of to your point, they were sort of like, because a few of the parents that did contact me, not all, but maybe two of them were white themselves. And they were like, I don't know. I don't have enough knowledge. I can't come from the right place to understand where my child's coming from. I'm doing all that I can to be supportive and have discussions, but even my kid is like, you never mind, you don't really understand, or you're not able to really understand what I'm trying to convey. And so then, being in a place where they can talk about being mixed and have their therapist be like, yeah, me too, and then run through all that stuff, is.
What do you help them with? Is it just kind of creating a space where they can feel heard and talk about the different situations they found themselves in and have that empathy kind of? Or were there some steps that you were able to give them to do, like next time they find themselves in that situation?
Well, I think it's a great question, because that's just where it started. And I think maybe from a parent point of view, that's what the parent could see and sort of thought, oh, I need to, like, this feels safe enough to get outside help for my kid because it's this national thing and my kid's being affected by it. But 1 or 2 sessions in, it becomes like, what's really going on? It's like, yeah, that was a part of it, and that is upsetting you. But once you were able to just kind of talk about it, you don't need to spend months discussing George Floyd and how it affects your life.
Yeah.
But what came out was all of their individual stuff, whether it's family stuff, just all the dynamics that really is what therapy is all about. So then I would address those things, whether it's, actual symptoms of depression that were existing way before and maybe the parent didn't see it, or there's family conflict, or there's, you know what I mean? So
essentially it's like the mixed thing is kind of almost like the shell.
Yeah.
Which is a unique shell. In order to, like you said, build that trust, it's helpful to have someone that understands what it's like to walk in the world with this kind of a shell.
Right.
But then ultimately it's breaking through that and going deeper and finding like what's really under the surface there, which is like universal things.
Yeah. I think that's a way to put it. You can say it's a cloak that you wear, or like a jacket, and then when you come in to a room, you feel safe enough to take the jacket off, and then you could just kind of be yourself, So I think in a lot of other spaces, it's hard for a mixed race, at least in therapy, it's hard for a mixed race person to do that. It's not impossible. You can still find a great therapist and get great work done. But perhaps when you want to bring in this mixed race piece, you might find a stopping point where that therapist is not able to help you as much.
And also I was just thinking maybe being mixed, it colors so many things that it's not always easy to like see where it stops and where it starts. I'm just like thinking about myself in terms of, we've talked about people pleasing, and, maybe that is because of so many things, but I think for me, it is to do with being this and that and feeling insecure about those things and feeling like I needed to hide some things because of, I don't know. I don't want to get too much into my own stuff, but all I'm saying is that I love the analogy of that it's like a shell and then you go inside and it's universal, but I just feel like maybe it sort of penetrates in ways that aren't so easy to, I don't know, it's not so stop-start, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if it's your shell, I feel like, is it turtles or something where they're actually, their spine is a part of their shell. They are one, even though they can go into it, they're part of it. So, like you said, it's still this identity and this experience is going to touch so many parts of your life, and you can't just separate it. It's going to be infused into a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So, I think absolutely.
The shell or the jacket, it's like, okay, you take it off, But it's not that it's disposable and that it's not needed anymore in the session. It is still there to provide a lot of context.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
To then what you're dealing with underneath the surface. So it's not like, okay, that's off now, unless it's still there and it's a reference point, maybe.
Yeah,
Is that what you mean?
100%. Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. So going to the parents of these children, how would you help those parents help their children?
At least in the private practice space, there's a lot of help that I would be helping them as far as maybe depression symptoms, anxious symptoms, stuff like that, like how they can support their kid at home. But when it comes to mixed race, there's just so much stuff. I think a lot of times it's helping a parent open a discussion with their child, helping a parent think about connection, cultural connection, and ways that they can provide that opportunity for their kids. I think a lot of parents underestimate how much access a kid has to the groups in their background and, kind of realizing, oh, wait, I may have had more connection, but my kid, they don't drive, they don't, I really dictate their after school stuff. So really helping them be creative, like, oh, wait, let me make sure they can take a class here or connect to this thing there, or every weekend I get them connected to a different Girl Scout group, or just something where they get access to the people so that they don't have to walk around school saying, well, I don't have any, fill in the blank friends. And so I don't know about fill in the blank culture. That parent can really play a role in that. So it's kind of empowering the parent to realize you have a lot more control over, the connection, the groups, the access that your kid has. And then it's more helping them navigate the identity piece of it. So a lot of times it's providing education for the parent, but then it's also, like I said, just how can you support your kid when maybe the rest of the world is telling them, oh, well, you can't be this, you don't look that, or at least at home, you can be the contrary sort of voice and empower them to sort of be like, oh, yes, I can because my parents said so. And that really goes a long way. I often talk about a client I had that when I first started seeing her, she was very aware of all the peers would say, you don't look this, you don't look that. Oh, you're that. Oh, that's your mom, or that's, and it really bothered her. And so she was already a kind of a quiet, introverted kid. But once her parents became involved in saying, well, it doesn't matter what they say. Well, one, she had a therapist that's like, okay, they're dumb, but she also had the parents that could come in and say, well, it doesn't matter what they say. Who am I? Like, I am your parent. I'm looking at you. So, of course, you're this. And who's, grandma, and who's this? But over the years, they were able to encourage her to try hairstyles, wear certain clothing. They were able to connect her to programs that she probably would not have felt comfortable seeking out before, until her parents were like, of course you can go to this thing or apply for that art program. So it's a really great thing to see how much she's kind of stepped into herself, and then she can roll her eyes at people when they're saying whatever they used to say. Now she could be like, they always say that. It's so annoying, that kind of thing. And I'm like, I'd much rather you be there because the microaggressions are not going to go away, but at least you know how to let them roll off your back a little bit more. So she's got more resilience in that regard,
Yeah. Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. Mm-hmm. Do you find like most parents are quite willing to take the guidance that you give them? It's
hard to say because I think, at least in that case, we're talking about my private practice where a parent already is saying, I want to get my kid support. So, of course, they're more open. And in my private practice, if you have a child that wants therapy, I require the parents to be involved as well. So, a parent is going to have a monthly session, or it used to be more often, just depends on the scheduling, but at the very least, a monthly session with just the parents where I'm really helping them kind of, figure out stuff. So they are going to be more willing. I really don't get to access the parents who are not, in that regard. On social media, I do see more parents that are not interested and have negative comments of like, oh, this is stupid. There's no need for this. My kid knows who they are, and you're causing more problems. You're the issue. You're increasing racism by talking about these things. I'm like, what?
Really? Those are people's reactions?
on social media. You know?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of parents say, like, if you just don't talk about it, that's the stance.
You know what? I don't understand that, but I know that exists.
Yeah.
And I think that even in circles that I move in, I'm sure maybe it's a generational thing. Like people from, I don't want to make sweeping statements, but I know of maybe some people who from that generation would be like, well, just ignore them. And, you know, it's silly. They're silly people. They don't know what they're talking about. Like when they say, you know, horrible racial insults and stuff like that. So it's very much like sweep it under the carpet, carry on with life, be positive.
Right. I mean, that's a classic go-to for a lot of parents, but especially in this space. For me, anyway, I do meet a lot of parents, like in the work that I do through coaching. It's like that's where parents start. Parents with mixed race kids start with the encouraging, dismiss, I'm just helping you move forward. Let's not let this, you know, pull us down type of thing. And I get the motivation. But what I think those parents find is it only goes so far. It only has so much impact. And then they're stuck. And the parents like, what do I say now? Like my kid keeps bringing this thing back to me. And I can't just be like, just ignore them. Well, if you just don't get, you know, pay it any attention, it'll go away. Like that stuff doesn't go that far.
Yeah.
So those are the parents that are like, okay, I don't know what else to say then. Because I've said the things that I thought would be helpful. And now I realize, oh, not only do I not know what to say, I don't really know what they're talking about. I don't know what their experience is. And this sounds deeper than I thought it would be. And so now I need more. Like I need more information.
So let's say I'm that parent and I'm just like, I don't believe in what you're doing. And then I finally, I'm up against some sort of situation with my kid. And I feel like, okay, something needs to happen. What's the first steps you would take me through as someone who's come from like, I don't want to talk about it, let's brush it under the carpet, to, okay, there's a little crack here. I'm willing to hear what you've got to say. How would you walk me through those?
Well, there's so many different ways, right? I have a lot of secrets on how I do it. No, but I mean, what you're making me think of is there was a father I worked with. This was a couple. I was really coaching the mom, but she was like, I really want my husband to be a part of this. And her concern was, I want to talk about these things with either my kids or my in-laws, and my husband is not understanding, on board, doesn't quite get it, doesn't land for him. So even though the sessions were with her, she's like, can I invite him to come? And I'm like, as many as he wants to come to, he can come. And so the coaching meetings with him were very much starting there. His stance was, I don't see what the big deal is. You know, what matters more in life? It's character. It's working hard. It's, you know, that kind of a push through mentality, which is not wrong. It's like, great, teach your kids all those things, but also there is another thing that they're trying to grapple with. So how I helped or how I worked with that dad was kind of going into his experience. And what was interesting is what came out is that he had an immigrant parent who was from a European country and had moved to the U.S. And I'm trying to just kind of keep a little bit, you know, neutral, but it was a European country that spoke another language, right? And so his father spoke that language. He grew up understanding that language and grew up eating those foods. And for all intents and purposes, it was very much a fill-in-the-blank European country home upbringing. And he didn't realize it. He knew it, but he didn't really let it sink in that way. So when I found that out, I was kind of like, okay, so then have you ever had experiences where, you know, and he kind of realized, oh, wait, I kind of erased all of that and I just became American. But wait, yeah, I do remember this language and I do speak this and we do celebrate that thing. And so there was this one piece of it, which was helping him realize his own racial experience because he had erased it by being white and American. He's like, I'm just white and everything's been fine. So just push through and work hard until he was like, oh, wait, I do have a background. And then it was allowing him to feel connected to like, oh, wait, could I teach that to my kids? And did I have I exposed my kid to like all these things that I know, even though my parent has passed away? And realizing for him, we were able to go through some stories of like how he felt as European country person in America, how things were a little bit different sometimes. And, you know, it was just little opportunities to be like, well, now your kid is going to have a bigger version of that, or your kid is, you know, and so he was kind of like, oh, okay, all right, I see what you're talking about. And
yeah, that's so great. You were able to tap into that for him to get an understanding of what his child is going through on a fraction of it. So essentially he was able to understand it from a multicultural point of view because he's white. Is that correct?
Well, for me, it was more like finding empathy. I feel like every person and every parent on some level has had an experience where they feel like an other or outside of the belonging, or so it's just a matter of finding that so that they can feel it in the moment and be like, oh yeah, I totally remember what that felt like. And then, oh, my kid's going to have that maybe times 10, times 5, whatever. At least I have a starting point. That was a big piece of it for him. But it really was in the beginning a lot of, dare I say, arguing or debating back and forth with why does race matter? Why, you know, who really pays attention to this stuff? I'm like, are you looking at your wife? Like you didn't, like you married someone who literally is not from your background.
Is it like he was going through discomfort of having to realize that it's actually something that needs to be talked about?
He was grappling with, I mean, the easiest way to say it is white privilege. Like he's never had to think about it.
Yeah.
He's never had to like think and sit back and say, oh, what does it mean to be white in America?
Yeah.
He just was. He was very resistant at first, and he's on the call with his wife like, well, she wanted me to be here. I don't really see the point.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and then it was sort of like, there was a couple worksheets that I was able to have him do, and then we can go back and discuss it, like identity worksheets. I guess it's called like an identity wheel, but it's just having a parent really look at all facets of their identity and then answer some questions about what's more salient, what parts of their identity do they not really pay attention to, as a way to get them to like self-reflect.
What are some of the questions or categories?
It's very straightforward. Like, you know, what languages did you speak? What's your nationality? All the like classic identity categories, gender, race, etc. And then you get to answer like, which part of your identity do you think about a lot on a daily basis, and which one do you not really think about that much? So going over that with him, he was able to realize, oh yeah, I don't really think about being white at all. But then when we had that ethnic piece come in, because of the European country, I was like, wait, what's this? Hold on, you know? And he was like, oh yeah. I'm like, what do you mean? Oh yeah, like your whole life. You know what I mean?
What was he like after you worked with him on that?
Like I said, he was just much more open, and he's like, I understand what we're doing. I understand what my wife wants to do. Because her 2 children were already saying things that were concerning the mom around how they viewed themselves, how they viewed their racial and ethnic background, how they viewed their peers and their father. And it was a little, you know, it raised a lot of red flags for the mom. And he was like, okay, I am getting it now, and I know how to support her. You know, whatever she does, I can support it versus arguing about it.
I want to bring my case to you.
Yes.
So
It's a therapy session.
yeah, that's why we brought you here. But I personally feel that I have a complicated case. So, okay. So the listeners who've listened to the first few episodes of our podcast already know some of my backstory, but I'll just kind of go over it really quickly. But basically, my mom is Australian. Okay. My dad passed away. He's Japanese. He was Japanese. But I was born and raised in Israel. And I left home. I moved to the States when I was almost 18 to pursue whatever, dance, and ended up staying in the States till now. So it's been over 20 years. And ended up marrying a Swiss guy who's also an immigrant who's been in the States for over 20 years. And we're kind of at that point in life where we're thinking about kids, of maybe becoming parents. And honestly, from the mixed perspective, I feel terrified. And there's a few reasons. One reason is that both my husband and I struggle with is we don't identify ourselves as American. Even though we've been at this point living here longer than in our origin countries, we just don't feel American. We love living here and we love the people here and we love our life here, but when I look at some of my American friends that were born and raised here, I always feel that I'm different than they are, and that I don't think I ever will be like this American person. And it's hard for us to come to terms with the fact that if we have a kid here, that our kid is going to be American. So that's one thing. Again, not looking down at being American, but just that it's this new thing. It could have been any other country.
Yeah.
And then talking about bringing those cultures that you come from and giving them to your kid. So now we kind of have a range of cultures that both of us bring. My husband, who's Swiss, it would be a little bit easier for him because it's just one thing. But for me, it's three things. It's the Japanese, the Australian, and the Israeli. The Israeli, my parents are not Israeli. So, and I don't think I will ever go back and live in Israel with my kid. So I don't know how to bring, and I'm not Jewish either. How do I bring that? Like, I speak Hebrew fluently, but basically there would be no link between my kid and this whole life that I had in Israel growing up. And then as it was, there would be me, but it would be hard. And even from a visa perspective, like I don't even know how my kid would be able to, visit Israel frequently. I mean, they could on a tourist visa, but Israel's like it's an intense country, and especially with what's going on now. And I think sometimes I have trouble coming in and out, and but I'd have a kid that wasn't born in Israel, and I still have a few relatives there, but I'm just kind of have this feeling like, how will I be able to keep that link strong? I mean, I can just, that's one thing. And then another thing is my link to Japan and Australia is there, but I don't speak Japanese. I never lived in Japan or Australia. And it's like, I'm trying to hold on to those things, but they're not that strong in me to begin with. How do I give that to my kid as well? And then how do I incorporate that with a husband who's from another culture? And even I'm like thinking like practically as far as languages, like I don't speak Swiss German. So what language would I speak to my baby Hebrew? Would I try to get him to learn Japanese? Would I just feel, I think that is one of the reasons why I haven't jumped into parenthood yet, because I feel like I'm getting emotional because I just feel like, oh my God, I don't think I could do it. It would be too much, and it would be too strenuous as well on our relationship, because we're still learning how to navigate our different backgrounds and the gaps between how we do things. And I'm scared that having a kid is going to bring all of our differences to the forefront. That's a third thing. So yeah, that was a lot, but I dumped it all.
I love that you shared that, Hanna-Lee, and I've never heard you talk about that before, and I'm really understanding these things that you're saying and these fears that you have, and I'm just interested to hear.
I think the questions that you're asking are very much like there is a right answer, and I think that is a place that a lot of parents who are mixed race themselves, because I do work with a lot of those as well. It's not just monoracial parents with mixed race kids. It's also mixed race parents who are like you said, oh my God, wait, they're not going to have as much as, or I was already working on all this stuff for myself. But I think what's interesting to me is that you asked a bunch of questions like, should I, and will I speak Hebrew? Will I speak? It's like, what do you want to do? I think that the issue that applies so much to the mixed race experience is this feeling or this belief that there is a right way to be, or there's a correct way to interact with the world, versus realizing, oh, I don't need to, or I can't follow, first of all the rules that you might have already set out, so I should stop trying. And then second of all, oh, I get to just be me and I can do that however I want. That is the freedom that I wish for everybody, but I try to teach the parents I work with to teach their kid, because that kid is going to grow up in a society that's like, well, you know, you can't do that. Well, you know, you're supposed to, and you should, and you didn't, you know, and then they're like, wait, whoa. So until the parent is like, no, all of that is not true. You get to do it however it works for you and for us. And I have a couple families that are Jewish and Christian. So if that means we do Hanukkah and then we do Christmas and then we have some, you know, classic, I don't know, Jewish foods on our Christmas table, who's going to tell us anything?
Yeah.
You know, like, so what? You know, or whatever. You know, sometimes those two holidays cross over. So it's like, okay, we're lighting these lights and we're doing this. Other people would be like, oh, you can't do that. Well, yes, we can.
That's exactly what we're doing.
Well, that's I know, and that's another thing. Like, I go home for Christmas in Israel, where there's no really, there's a little bit of Christmas there, but not really.
In your house there is.
Yeah, but culturally, I feel culturally Jewish, even though I'm not Jewish. And so, yeah, I would want to impart some of these Jewish traditions to my kid, but not raise them as a Jewish person. And I'm like, that's kind of... I guess I feel judged.
No,
or
it's not,
something.
'cause that's you.
That's what I'm saying. You feel judged because you're... That's why I say you're saying there's a right answer. Oh, I shouldn't do it that way. But really, all you really want is your kid to be connected to your story. You're their parent. So you get to say, mommy grew up here and mommy speaks this and mommy knows that. And you know what I mean? And then when your kid gets to be 17 and 18, wait, mom, so wait, you just... Oh, like then they can start being like, oh, I didn't know this and that. But the presentation you gave to them was, this is totally fine because this is how I lived. And you're just telling, I'm connecting you to my story and my life versus the rules of the groups. So that's the first thing I would say for you is just like, the goal here is when we connect to cultures, we're connecting to people. So your husband's story, his people, how he wants to tell it. There's going to be some things that he's going to say about being Swiss that other folks are going to be like, that is not how we Swiss, you know?
He is not the conventional Swiss guy.
Right.
I will tell you that.
And so he gets to do that. He doesn't have to be like, well, now I got to be a different Swiss person to like be with my kid. No. And the same for you. You get to be like a complex individual. And I think the more that you present the complexity of like your experience, your identity, your upbringing, your kid feels empowered to be like, me too. And now I'm going to walk on the playground and be like, well, I'm Japanese, Israeli. You know, like he could just list whatever he wants and have everybody else deal with it. The second piece I would say is, which I think a lot of parents who are mixed race say, I am not as connected to my, you know, what do I do about that?
Yeah.
And to that I say, well, you get the opportunity to learn together. Again, there is no, oh, I didn't learn it and now it's too late and I'm not allowed to give it to my kid.
You're hitting like home for me. That was exactly.
Yeah, but that's not. I mean, where does it say that? You know what I mean? That to me is the classic rule, you know, like I said, rule of like, to be Japanese, you had to have lived there, that's how you are Japanese. And you're like, well, I didn't do those things, so I guess I can't, you know, somehow we're just not allowed to be Japanese anymore. No, you know, why are you not allowed to learn Japanese later? Why are you not allowed to learn how to cook foods or connect to a community and take your kid along with you? There's a lovely, I don't know if you both watched 1000% Me.
Yes. I was going to bring it up earlier.
Yeah. There's a father in there who's Filipino and he's now got a mixed race child. And he said, whoa, it made me think a lot about me growing up in the Philippines and how much I, you know, either purposely or by default, lost a lot of connection to my upbringing, and that he's revisiting it with his son and reconnecting. That's great. You know, that's the lovely aspect of it. So I always encourage mixed, you know, parents who are mixed race to like, no, you can learn more and learn it with your kid. Now it's this lovely thing of, oh, I get to learn something with my parent versus always being told by my parent what to do. Oh, go clean your room. Oh, let's go do our Japanese homework. Oh, wow, you did better than me. Oh, man, mommy's struggling. You know, like it's a different place that they get to see you in as well. But I just think it's the permission I want people to feel like the permission comes from you. The permission comes from your own ancestry, not from society. You know what I mean? So it's like permission means, oh, am I allowed to be Japanese? Oh, well, who are my ancestors? Oh, freaking generations of Japanese people I'm related to. So yeah, absolutely I am. Society might have some rule about, oh, well, but you got to do it this way, and you don't do this and you don't do that. No, I'm literally related to them. So please leave me alone. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
And also, like with Israel, I'm not related to them, but
It's the life you've lived.
Yeah, but you grew up there. Your
and
third culture
permission
kid.
again.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I feel like you just being you by default, you're going to pass all this stuff on to your child. Because you just will. I know you.
He's going to be a confused kid.
Well, see, but to me, that's what society says, right? Yeah. That's what the annoying Uncle Fred would say. Oh,
so
your
annoying.
kid's going to be confused.
Yeah.
No, your kid's going to be multicultural and know about so many things and be so interesting, and it's going to shape them.
Or you can say, well, yeah, my kid is going to be confused if you keep setting these arbitrary rules that not everybody fits in. Even monoracial people don't fit in them. But if we're going to follow those, then yeah, I guess we'd all be confused. Because there are many, many Japanese Americans, maybe even Japanese Israelis that are like, can I be? I don't know. Like, and they have two parents that are Japanese, or you know what I mean? Like, and they're sitting there like, well, I don't do this and I don't do that, and I grew up in Cali. Like, I'm so Oakland. Am I still Japanese? Am I allowed? Like, at some point, those rules, they fail everyone.
Yeah.
Because they're too limiting. So I think seeing that big picture, that's another thing I often try to instill in the parents I work with, is like, let's look at the big picture of how society is set up. It's already set up to not create space for your mixed race child. So therefore you have to fight that for your kid, with your kid, on behalf of your kid, so that they have the space to be like, oh, I'm okay to assert my Sri Lankanness in a black space and assert my blackness in a Sri Lankan space. That has to be created. Otherwise, I would always be like, oh, well, I can't do that because da-da-da.
For me, another part of it is like, I just feel this responsibility, and that I don't know if I'm up for having that responsibility. Like, it's daunting for me to be proactive in my potential child's life to do all of those things. But I also don't want to be passive, infusing him with all the stuff, which I know they'll come in no matter what. But I feel nervous, like I don't know if I'm just in a loop, stuck in a loop, or if that's a separate issue.
No, I think it is a separate issue. Honestly, I think women are expected to be the cultural ambassadors of the home and provide all of the exposure, and sometimes, you know, we don't see fathers kind of feeling like that's a role they have to have or something that they need to pass on. But again, I always encourage fathers to get involved, especially when, you know, they represent like some cultural aspect for that child, and then the mother is feeling like, well, I gotta expose them to your thing too, or I don't know how to do that. You're you, like, you lived it. Can you come get involved? So I think there's a true burden that you're feeling, which is like on top of all the other things I'm expected to do as a mother. I'm supposed to be this cultural ambassador for not just one. You know, you're like, wait,
yes,
that's the daunting part about it. That's real. Of like, okay, maybe other moms just have like one sort of cultural thing that they can expose the kid to, but you're like, this is a lot. These are many, and which parts do I put where? So I think that's a fair statement.
So do I. It is many, because I just have, not just, but, you know, the UK English and Indian. But I feel like a thing that helps me is to know that old saying of it takes a village to raise a child. And I put some of that responsibility, I think, lovingly on my family, knowing that she will get that exposure to the Indian culture and the country music and, you know, the folk stuff from my dad. And it will happen with your siblings too. Your siblings are going to be a part of the baby's life.
Yeah, it's
And your
also
mum.
like a technical and a financial thing. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're multicultural,
Right.
it just it literally is more expensive.
Yes.
Because you
Travel
gotta
and-
make that travel. You gotta, I mean, you're doing it now. It's like, and when you're going, and if you have a kid, you really need to take a longer chunk, and it's just like another layer of like navigating, the technical elements
Right.
of. I mean, obviously, I could give them exposure through things online, but the best way is just take the kid to Switzerland, and then it'll impact him,
For sure.
But getting the kid to Switzerland, getting them to Japan, getting them to
Yes.
Australia, getting them to Israel, giving them that quality time with those communities. I know that we'll do it, but I mean, even just, again, taking care of myself and getting myself home every year for Christmas is always a challenge.
Even getting myself up in the morning and ready.
It's true though, and then you're gonna have 2 children also to get ready in the morning, and I mean that's why I say it is a burden. I mean, and honestly, we have to be real too. I don't think we've talked about it to this point, but there is a loss, or there is a grief that has to be acknowledged too, because there is a loss of culture. I mean, even like I said with the fictional Japanese person that I invented that grew up in Oakland, there is a loss there from parent to child, because they grew up with a lot more exposure to American culture. There is just a loss of Japanese-ness that's going to happen, because those parents are like, well, you didn't get to do every day in Japanese schools and all the things that we would, we're trying our best to give you what we can. And so I think there does have to be a place to sort of just acknowledge a little bit, like I said, of grief or loss, that, okay, my kid won't know Israeli culture as well as I do, or they won't, that kind of thing. And I think that's okay too. And coming to terms with that, still freedom to be like, okay,
Totally.
that just is what it is. Now let's move forward, because that doesn't mean I can't do it. It just means it won't be the same, or it won't be as much.
Yeah, being okay with change and progress.
Right.
Yeah, I feel that strongly, that grief, that loss of cultures that I had and cultures that I haven't tapped into enough yet. When you said that, I was like, oh, I feel that.
Yeah.
And then it just locks into that fear of like, well, if I hold off being a parent a little bit longer, then I don't have to lose those things. But it is, like you said, there's that moment where you got to say, okay, life is changing every day anyway, every moment. And can I be flexible and go with the next thing and trust that the next thing could be amazing?
So when I found out that we were going to have you on the podcast, obviously very excited, started doing loads of research, went onto your website and saw that you had a quiz. And I thought, I'm going to take that quiz. And it's called How Woke is Your Mixed Race Parenting? Here we go. It takes 4 minutes, everybody. Okay. Start quiz. When people ask about my kid's background, I try to answer when people ask me to describe my kid's background and even break it down using words like half and fourth and part. B, I don't like it when people ask me to describe my kid's background. I just want them to be seen as human. C, I worry I'm not answering right when people ask me to describe my kid's background. I don't mind it when people ask my kid's background, but I guess I do just want them to see her as human. So I'm going to go with B.
I don't know. I think I'm going to try to, I will maybe not use half and quarter or whatever, but I will say part. I will say they're this and they're this and they're this. So,
Okay.
So what are you saying?
I'm going to go with
I
A.
think that was the A.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I do want them to be seen as human, obviously, but I'm just going to go with A.
Okay.
Okay.
2, when it comes to my race, A, I'm not really sure race has been an important part of my life. B, I'm part of a racial minority, so I've had to think about my race a lot in my life. C, I've been reflecting a lot more on my own race and racial identity.
I would say C.
Me too.
For me.
And I think you can notice that this quiz when I made it, it really was geared towards monoracial parents of mixed race kids.
Yeah.
So I've had a few mixed race parents say, wait, I can't answer this. And I'm like, you're right. It might not have a response. It's very, there's a different purpose for the quiz, but yeah, it was with monoracial parents in mind, because at least all the research, most of the research right now that exists is on monoracial parents with mixed race kids.
Yeah.
A few articles now are coming out of like second generation, like mixed race stuff. So certainly there could be a revision, but that where I got these questions and stuff is just like, what are the common and classic things that we see showing up in research that are often sources of conflict or problems for the child?
Yeah. When I hear the word monoracism, monoracism, I cannot keep up with all these new terms and isms. B, I have heard of monoracism, but I'm not sure I can remember or explain it. C, I can explain monoracism, and I'm still unpacking how it impacts my family. I think I'm between B and C, because I do know what it is, but also I don't feel totally confident to explain it, I guess. I'm still unpacking how. Do you know what? I'm going to go with C. Yeah, I'm unpacking it, and I do have some sort of understanding.
So I've never heard anyone utter the word monoracism before, but I feel like I'm going to start using it. So is monoracism, when I'm just off of the word itself, basically someone who's monorace, who's being like racist against someone who's biracial or multiracial? It's like thinking that being monorace is better than...
Right, better or standard, or that everyone should fit into one category.
Yeah.
And you can't be more than one category.
Exactly. So yeah, I do know that, but I just have never heard that term, which I like. You're a mono-racist.
I don't know if it's used that way. But yeah.
So I would say C.
Okay.
All
right, 4. When I think of my kids' school, we're going to have to imagine this. When I think of my kids' school, A, I don't think my kids' school is very diverse, but I'm okay with that because the quality of the education is good. B, I feel like my kid might be the only mixed race kid at their school, and this worries me. C, my kid attends a racially diverse school where there are other families with mixed race kids. I'm going to go with the ideal and think that I will put her in a racially diverse school. Her being my kid.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's the ideal, but I mean, I don't know where life will take us. So I will go with the ideal, but I know that for me and you, that wasn't the case. We were,
Yeah. I think if she didn't go to a diverse school with other mixed race kids, yes, it would be a concern.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
All righty.
When I think about whiteness, A, I have not really examined how whiteness impacts my life or my child's life. B, I sometimes wonder how whiteness impacts my child's life. C, I've been trying to examine how whiteness impacts my own life and that of my child. Oof.
I think I would go with C, because I'm still trying to figure that out, because I actually kind of identify as a white person and forget that I look Asian and that I come across I forget that I think it's because of my Australian mother, and it was I don't know. So I've never been treated as a white person, but I was surrounded by white people, and I have a white mother and was impacted in that way. So I'm still trying to figure it out, and and then my husband's white. So for my kid, we'll see how they come out.
I feel like I am aware that Aurora does definitely look fairer than me. It's not really something that I've really thought about how it's going to impact her life. But through doing this podcast, it's made me examine things. So I'm going to go with C as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is hard. So for time purposes, we're going to finish doing the quiz on our own and come back to you guys with the results.
Mine is you stay woke.
Oh my gosh, I stay woke too.
Yay!
I was nervous. I thought I was gonna get like B-.
Like you're almost there. But.
Yeah, I feel I could see. It was really great to take it because I could see where my insecurities are. I mean, I know that I have insecurities around this, but things that I hadn't really considered. And I know that also it's about being present and like face each thing as it comes when I become a parent.
Yeah, so I mean, at the very least, we could say the quiz is not, it's more meant to highlight various areas that parents raising mixed race kids need to pay attention to as it relates to their child's growing identity. So that's why I have questions about, how does whiteness impact your child? Even if your kid doesn't have a white parent, whiteness impacts all of us. So that's the trick of that question. But, schooling, neighborhood, socializing options, even the idea of the parents' racial identity. These are all factors. Like I said, it's all coming out of research. These are all factors that influence how a child sees themselves and navigates their own identity. And so that's why I kind of try to formulate these questions this way. It's not really meant to say anything. It's not really prescriptive. It's more like you said, which is just, it should make you think and be like, oh shoot, schooling. I didn't really think about that. If my kid's the only one, and then if it's like, well, I don't care, then your score, whatever, would go down because, hey, you do need to think about those things. And so really all of those questions as well are topics that I address in my coaching programs with parents of mixed race kids. So I try to make sure, are you thinking about environment? Are you thinking about your own racial identity? Are you thinking about how your child looks and is perceived in the world? Let's not ignore that if your child walks down the street, maybe they will be seen as only white or only Indian or, whatever it is. And are you aware of that? Because then you can have conversations with your kid when they come home and say, how come so-and-so said this? Or, why do they keep asking me if I'm Asian? I thought I'm Asian. And then the parent can be like, let's talk about it, right?
Yeah.
You are now seeing how the world sees you. Great. Let's have that conversation. So that's the philosophy behind the quiz. It's meant to make a parent think, maybe realize, ooh, I didn't think about that. And I guess maybe I should be. And then perhaps they would be interested in saying, is this a resource? Can I get more help from you? And then I can be like, why, yes, let's work together.
Yeah.
I think it's also really nice that we're living in a time where these things are an option because growing up, even if our parents would have been aware that we're the only mixed kids or whatever, there was no other option.
Right.
That was just the landscape of where we were raised.
Right.
So it's cool that, there's so much more support for people.
There's so much more thinking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, even actually, I should challenge that technically because what you've said is there was no other option. No, that's how Mask started. The co-founder of Mask was a Jewish mom who married an African-American man, and she had 2 little girls, and she's like, wait, I want my kids to have kids to play with, and I want them to see other mixed race kids. And she was like you and was like, this is not around. This is not a thing. But she just happened to be the kind of person that was like, well, then I'll start it. Well, then I will. She is the person, and I do this as well. But she could be in the grocery store minding her own business and see you with your child and be like, excuse me, Hi, not to bother you, and I don't want to be weird, but also I see that your kid is mixed, and hey, I do these things, and can I have your number? And it had to be a lot more in your face then because she didn't have the social media, she didn't have business cards, she really was just like, I am an in your face woman, and I don't care how you feel about it. I'm trying to build a community, and that's how she did it.
That's amazing. And just to know that that's out there, I just have one final quick question. For those people at home who are maybe listening to this episode and they haven't been to therapy or, they probably won't take that step, what are maybe a couple of tips that parents could use to open up the doors of conversation about being mixed with their children?
I don't necessarily believe everybody has to join a coaching program, but, it depends on the parent and how open and ready they are to have harder conversations. So I think that's the starting point. Is like, one tip is, how do you get yourself ready to have difficult conversations that don't have one clear answer, where you don't get to be the parent that's like, oh, I know this, it's an ongoing twisty turny conversation. So the first tip is like, can you go there? Can you get yourself into a place where you can go there? Whatever that means. You need to read, you need to watch some videos, whatever. I think the second thing is, depending on the age of the child, I always tell parents, use books, children's books, as an excuse. Like, if you're sort of the parent that's like, I don't even know what to say. I want to tell my kid about or race and racism, but I don't even know where to start, and I feel like I'm going to go overwhelm my kid, and I don't know, what if I start crying, like whatever it is. But there are children's books that do it for you. And so then you read the book to your kid, you get a sneaky chance to learn as well and be like, oh, okay, I like the way they said that. And then your kid can ask you questions, and then you go there. So that's why are you ready to have the hard conversations? Then when you read the books and your kid asks you questions, we go back to one. Okay, I'm willing to have these hard conversations. Well, that's a good question. Let's go learn together. Let me show you what I think. And let's go ask daddy. Let's go ask mommy. Let's go, and then you kind of keep the ongoing conversation. And I think the third tip really is, wherever you can, try to learn about the mixed race experience. There is a general shared thing that we all can experience, no matter what the background. And the more that parents understand what it's like to be mixed race in a monoracial society, whether it's Switzerland, the US, whatever. I mean, certainly there's going to be differences depending on the country. But by and large, even in our international research, we just see some universal things that are shared. So the more that the parent can learn that, the more they'd be ready to see when their kid comes home and brings something up about that. They can be like, oh, yeah, I knew that you were going to experience this thing. So that would be a tip for me. And I think, at least on my social media, that's a great resource place to start, because I try to address all those things. How to have the hard conversations. What are some books you can read? And what are so many angles of the mixed race experience? But not just my page. There are so many pages that try to talk about the mixed race experience from so many angles. So the more that a parent just tries to take all that in, they can be prepared, better prepared.
It's been so just wonderful having you here today, and just touching on all of these kind of things that come up around being mixed and trying to be a good parent to mixed kids, or being a mixed person who's wants to raise mixed kids in the most supportive way. And I'm going to have to go and listen back to this episode again myself. You really gave me a lot to think about. And I feel like, off of the conversation we had, like, okay, it's not going to be maybe simple, but there is definitely a way forward, and I just can keep questioning, like, the belief systems I have around this, and see if I can, like you said, give myself permission to let go of maybe these beliefs that aren't going to be supporting or working for me anymore. Where can people find you, Dr. Jenn?
Yes, well, on the social medias, of course, I am at Dr. Jenn Psych, and that's JENN, 2 N's, Psych. And that's Instagram, all the places, I think, is pretty much the same handle, TikToks and Twitter or X or whatever. So I do I'm mostly active on Instagram, though. I will say that. That's where most of my stuff is. I would start there. That's where you're going to get a lot of little tidbits of education. Other than that, my website is drjenpsych.com, and that's where you can find all the information about my coaching and working with me as a parent coach. And lastly, the parent community that I'm building, which you all have mentioned, which is the Mixed Life Academy. So that's actually an app for your phone, so that you don't have to be competing with Facebook and all the other places that kind of pull our attention in all these different ways. But it's a learning community where you can find videos from me on all these topics, understanding the mixed race experience, how to prepare your kids for microaggressions, etc. And there is what I call the parent community there, which is much like a Slack channel where you can interact with each other. Parents can meet and greet. And so it's a place where I'm slowly growing it so that I want to create the place where parents can go and say, oh, I know where I can find other parents with mixed race kids. Yes, it might be virtual, but at least I can go and find someone that might be in my city and maybe we can meet up. So yeah, that's the Mixed Life Academy.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For creating that.
I know. Go,
well, like
Jen.
you said, both of you are saying like, oh, I wish I had this when I was a kid. I mean, that's really a big motivation for me. I mean, I also grew up in a time when my mom and dad they weren't thinking about those things, and they certainly weren't looking for the resources, and I don't think they would have found it if they did. So it's sort of like, like once I realized, oh wait, I have the skills to build all those things, it's become a big passion project of mine of like, okay, let me build the place,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. All right, so to close, let's do a little quote. The reward for conformity is that everybody likes you except yourself. Rita Mae Brown.
Well, a quote I like a lot is as following: "Be you, the world will adjust."
Oh, love that.
Yeah, I like that one too, because I mean, that's what I feel like I'm always trying to teach that, whether on my videos for mixed race people or for parents. It's start with you, and then it really is true that everybody adjusts around.
It is true.
Yeah, if I walk around, I'll leave this last anecdote. I know we're closing, but if you remember, I think it was 2006, there was the tsunami in Sri Lanka. It happened all over South Asia. Yeah. But before then...
During Christmas.
Yes, right. Like the day after or something, or day of. So before that, I had already been very vocal about, just to all of my friends, and I have a big African-American community that I'm a part of, like friends and etc. And so wherever I could, I'd mention Sri Lanka or say this or that about it. And I didn't realize though, but in my email handle then, I also had Sri Lankan in the email handle. So it's me talking about it and people, I guess, seeing my email. I didn't register it. I don't know when I made it, probably in college or something. So what I found really fascinating, and this is what I mean by the world will adjust. So many people who technically view me as an African-American woman, the day of or the day after started emailing me, I just want to check, are you okay? Isn't your family from here? Oh, what happened? I heard about this thing. And everybody's trying to contact me. And a few people, I was really surprised, I didn't even know they knew my background. And they're like, well, yeah, but I saw your email. So then I was like, oh, so a small little example, even just in my email of being me. And I really found it fascinating that so many people were empowered. I don't know if it's empowered, but they really were like, I need to check on her, even though I know how they view me or I know how they understand the world, which is a very monoracial way. They were like, but I need to check on her. And so to me, that was an example of for me, I'm going to keep doing this because clearly they're adjusting to me. I didn't need to hide anything. I didn't need to come out and say, oh, by the way, everyone, my family, It was just just being me was enough, So, yeah.
I love that. I'm going to teach that to Aurora, that exact quote.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this wonderful interview with the amazing Dr. Jenn and my former co-host, Amy. Thank you to both of them. That was truly a pleasure. I loved this episode, and I learned so much. Once again, next Sunday, if you guys want to hang out with me and Dr. Jenn, we're going to be at the Free to Be Fest, June 9th, Sunday evening, downtown LA. You can get your tickets. The link is in the show notes. Discount code MixUnderstood10. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and family. Please like, subscribe, follow, leave a review. Would really appreciate that. Come say hello on social media. And also, please support Mixunderstood by joining the Patreon. There's different options there. Lowest option right now is $3.99 a month. So that's pretty much $1 an episode. So if you want to tip $1 for listening to today's episode, then go to the Patreon. I would really, really appreciate it. It's been a labor of love, and it would be so helpful. Okay. On that note, I'm going to say goodbye, and I hope to see you Sunday at the Free to Be Fest. Otherwise, I will see you in next week's episode. Okay, bye. This episode was produced by me. Music by Matthias Kunzli.